Elijah Green moved through the gleaming corridors of Sterling Corp like a ghost, a phantom in faded gray overalls. Every swipe of his mop, every polish of a glass partition, was executed with a quiet dignity that belied the relentless ache in his lower back. For 10 years, this was his kingdom: the hushed cubicles, the echoing stairwells, the executive suites that smelled faintly of success and expensive coffee. He was the invisible man, the one who kept the corporate machine running, yet was rarely seen, let alone acknowledged. His motivation wasn't grand. It was simple, profound. Every dollar earned was a brick in the foundation of a better life for his daughter, Maya. She was 10, with eyes that sparkled with the same ambition her father once held, and a laugh that could chase away the darkest shadows. Maya's dream was to be an astrophysicist, a stargazer, and Elijah was determined to build her a ladder to the heavens, even if his own hands were calloused from scrubbing floors. Lately, though, that ladder felt like it was crumbling. His shifts had been cut, the extra hours he depended on vanishing like smoke. The medical bills for Maya's chronic asthma were mounting, a relentless tide threatening to drown them. He tried talking to his supervisor, old Mr. Henderson, but the man just shrugged, citing corporate restructuring. That's how he first noticed him, Mr. Thorne. Not the real Mr. Thorne, the CEO, but a younger, more casually dressed man who seemed to appear out of nowhere. He'd seen him lurking around the mailroom, observing the cafeteria staff, even sweeping alongside a cleaner in the break room for an hour, looking utterly out of place. Elijah, ever observant, sensed something was off. This wasn't a new hire, nor was he a typical executive. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, a way he absorbed everything, like a sponge. Elijah just kept his head down, focused on the steady rhythm of his work, praying he wouldn't attract any unwanted attention. He couldn't afford a misstep, not with Maya's next inhaler prescription due. One Tuesday, a week before Maya's birthday, the shoe dropped. Elijah was meticulously cleaning the main lobby, the morning sun streaming through the panoramic windows, when he heard a sharp, authoritative voice. "You, janitor." It was the casually dressed man from before, but now his voice carried an undeniable weight. Elijah turned, his heart thudding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. The man stood with an air of absolute control, his eyes, previously curious, now cold and scrutinizing. "I've been observing your work," he stated, his voice flat. "And quite frankly, it's unsatisfactory. Your efficiency is low, and your attention to detail is lacking." Elijah's mind reeled. Unsatisfactory? He prided himself on his work. "Sir, he started, but the man cut him off. "No excuses. Effective immediately, your services are no longer required." Elijah felt a physical blow, a cold dread seizing him. His vision blurred, the pristine lobby suddenly tilting. "But, my daughter," he stammered, the words catching in his throat. "She's sick. I need this job." The man's expression remained impassive, a mask of unyielding corporate decision. "That's unfortunate, but not Sterling Corp's concern. You'll receive your final pay stub by mail. Security will escort you out." As two burly security guards materialized, Elijah felt the shame burn in his cheeks, hotter than any fever. He was fired. Just like that. The invisible man was now, truly, nothing. But as the guards led him towards the exit, a different kind of fire began to ignite within him. It wasn't despair. It was a slow, simmering rage, a quiet resolve hardening his gaze. They had no idea who they had just dismissed. And they certainly had no idea what he had quietly, diligently been preparing for years. The walk home felt endless, each step an echo of Elijah's shattered hope. The city, usually a symphony of bustling life, now seemed to mock his silence. His mind replayed the boss's cold dismissal, the sting of unsatisfactory, the casual cruelty of being escorted out like a criminal. But beneath the raw hurt, something was solidifying. Not just anger, though that burned fiercely, but a calculated resolve. He thought of Maya's bright, ambitious face, the small drawing of a rocket ship taped to her bedroom wall. He couldn't let this destroy her future. He wouldn't. "Daddy," Maya's voice, a sweet melody, cut through his despair as he unlocked their apartment door. She rushed into his arms, her small body a warm anchor. "You're home early." He managed a weak smile, pulling her close, inhaling the scent of her hair, trying to compose himself. "Yeah, princess. Just finished up my duties for the day." He couldn't tell her yet. Not tonight. Not when she was bubbling with excitement about her upcoming birthday. That night, as Maya slept, Elijah sat at their worn kitchen table, illuminated by the dim glow of a single lamp. He pulled out a battered ledger, its pages filled with meticulous notes, dates, and names. This wasn't some sudden, irrational plan. This was something he had been building, piece by careful piece, for years. Elijah had always been observant, a quiet listener. As he cleaned the offices, he'd overheard conversations, seen documents carelessly left on desks, noticed patterns. He knew Sterling Corp wasn't as pristine beneath the surface as it appeared. He knew about the illicit backdoor deals, the inflated contracts, the hush money payments, the environmental shortcuts in their overseas factories. He knew about the quiet whispers of executives selling sensitive data to competitors. He'd seen enough to piece together a mosaic of systemic corruption, a house of cards built on greed. He had logged it all, driven by an instinct he couldn't quite name at the time, a vague sense that justice rarely found its way into the gilded cages of power. Now, that instinct had a name: retribution. The man who fired him, the undercover boss, Elijah had heard the whispers in the break rooms. Sterling Corp was apparently undergoing a secret audit from an external consulting firm, designed to root out inefficiencies and unethical practices before a major public offering. The man, Elijah deduced, was part of that team, perhaps even its leader, posing as a low-level employee to get an unbiased view. The irony was a bitter pill. He was fired for being unsatisfactory by someone actively ignoring the true rot within the company. A cold certainty settled over Elijah. His revenge wouldn't be violent or petty. It would be precise, devastating, and entirely legal. It would be the kind of revenge that exposed hypocrisy and held power accountable. He had enough information, enough documented proof, to sink Sterling Corp, or at the very least, severely damage its reputation and leadership. But he needed a plan, a strategy to deploy his arsenal effectively. He couldn't just walk into a police station with a ledger. He needed to find the right avenue, the one that would guarantee the greatest impact, not just for himself, but for every other invisible person who had been trampled underfoot by corporations like Sterling. He spent the next few days in a haze of fear and determination. He contacted a community legal aid group he'd seen advertised, explaining only that he had sensitive information about corporate wrongdoing. They were hesitant at first, but something in his quiet conviction, the sheer volume of his meticulously organized notes, convinced them to set up a meeting with a pro bono investigative journalist, Sarah Jenkins. This was his turning point, stepping out of the shadows, no longer the invisible man, but a man armed with truth, ready to fight. The fear for Maya was still there, a constant companion, but it was now overshadowed by a burning sense of purpose. He was no longer just fighting to survive. He was fighting to expose. Sarah Jenkins, with her sharp, analytical eyes and a reputation for breaking big stories, initially regarded Elijah with a healthy dose of skepticism. Many people claimed to have corporate dirt, but few had anything substantial. Yet, as Elijah methodically laid out his ledger, flipping through pages filled with dates, names, transaction IDs, and even coded references to offshore accounts, Sarah's skepticism morphed into rapt attention. He spoke with a quiet intensity, recounting overheard conversations, detailing suspicious activity, and even sketching out the layout of secure servers he'd seen accessed late at night. He described how he'd cross-referenced minor public records with internal memos he'd glimpsed, building an undeniable case. This is incredible, Elijah," she murmured, her voice laced with awe as she examined a printout of an internal email he'd copied, linking a high-ranking executive to a shell company. "This isn't just a few bad apples. This is a whole orchard of rot." Elijah finally told her about his firing, about the undercover boss, and the crushing blow it delivered. A flicker of something akin to outrage crossed Sarah's face. "They fired you for being unsatisfactory while their own house was falling apart from the inside," she scoffed. The irony is nauseating. Over the next few weeks, Elijah worked tirelessly with Sarah, often meeting in hushed corners of coffee shops or late at night at his apartment after Maya was asleep. He was no longer the invisible janitor. He was a silent partner, a vital source. Sarah, with her journalistic prowess, verified every detail, cross-referencing Elijah's notes with public records, financial statements, and anonymous tips she'd cultivated over the years. The sheer volume and meticulousness of Elijah's information accelerated her investigation by months. He even remembered details about the undercover boss, including a distinct watch he wore, which Sarah used to identify him as Mark Thorne, a senior partner at a prestigious global consulting firm hired to clean up Sterling Corp before its IPO. The very man who had dismissed Elijah so callously. The day the expose broke was a whirlwind. Sarah's article, titled Beneath the Gleam, How Sterling Corp's Polish Hit a Rotten Core, hit the digital wires, then exploded. It detailed a web of corruption, fraud, and unethical practices, citing overwhelming evidence. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Sterling Corporation share prices plummeted, investigations were launched, and several high-level executives were arrested. The media descended, demanding answers. In the ensuing chaos, Mark Thorne, the undercover boss who had fired Elijah, found himself at the center of a storm. His firm's reputation was in tatters, his cleanup operation revealed as a facade that had missed the actual, systemic corruption, and his personal judgment publicly questioned for firing a man who, it turned out, held the keys to unlocking the whole scandal. Days later, Elijah received a formal letter from Sterling Corporation. It wasn't a termination notice this time, but an apology and an offer, a substantial settlement for wrongful termination and a highly compensated consulting role in the newly formed Ethics and Compliance Department, tasked with rebuilding the company's integrity from the ground up. He wouldn't be scrubbing floors. He'd be cleaning house from the executive suite, a poetic justice that brought a quiet smile to his face. The first thing Elijah did with the settlement money was pay off all of Maya's medical bills and set up a college fund that would guarantee her path to the stars. He watched her that night, poring over a book on constellations, her eyes shining with youthful wonder. He hadn't just secured her future. He'd shown her the immense power of truth, resilience, and the quiet strength of the underestimated. His revenge wasn't about bitterness. It was about justice, and it had fundamentally changed not just his life, but the trajectory of many others, forcing a powerful corporation to finally see the invisible man who had always seen them. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and enjoy these other amazing stories.